Yeah, beautiful autumn day today. I don't know, it must have been about 23, 24 degrees, clear blue sky. So, but unfortunately, I had to sit inside all day and work. So, yeah, that's life.
What do you do for work, mate?
I work at the Australian Museum in Sydney.
Oh, wow. What a cool job.
Yeah,
What's sort of stuff do you... Sorry.
I look after the frozen tissue collection. I work in the DNA lab.
Wow. That is cool. That is cool. Now, I think maybe people can now hear us. So let me see let me just see if that's the case. So don't defame anybody while I'm just checking. And then we'll just get started. I'll hit record and we'll get started. They can actually see me, and I noticed when I sat down that I had my lunch all over my face, so I had to go and fix that. Yeah, it looks like people on the Hot Metal Facebook page can see us. So I'll hit record, and we'll get going. Hello, everybody. Welcome to White Line Fever Live. I haven't done one in a few weeks. Haven't done a rock and roll one in maybe 6 weeks or something like that. My name's Steve Mascord, and if you are listening on the podcast, welcome back. And our next guest is someone who I guess I've kind of like seen from a distance for maybe 25 years. Never actually spoken to. In fact, I read his name so many times, and I actually wasn't sure if it was pronounced Scott Ginn or Scott Ginn because I read it so many times, but I hadn't heard it said a lot of times. So I've done at least that amount of research. Welcome to the show, Scott Ginn. How are you, Scott?
Good, one. Hello.
Hello. And hello, everyone watching on the Hot Metal Facebook page, by the way, and hello to everyone who's watching on YouTube. Scott, you know, you're a songwriter, guitarist, vocalist, producer, engineer, front of house sound guy. And so it's hard to know where to start. But I normally don't start at the beginning. Like normally, you know, when you get someone on, you talk about, you know, whatever, you know, they've got a new album or they've got a book or something. But in your case, I really do want to start at the beginning because I'm in England, you're in Sydney, and you were born here. And like a lot of Australian musicians, illustrious Australian musicians, you were born in the British Isles. Where were you born, and how did your family come to move to Australia?
I was born in Beckenham in Kent, southeast England, and my family migrated to Australia in 1964. So we were 10-pound poms that came out on the P&O Canberra, and yeah, settled in Sydney, and I've lived in Sydney all my life.
Yeah, yeah, and Scott, do you think it's just a coincidence that so like the Young Brothers and Doc Neeson and all of them, all of the Gibbs, like is it a coincidence that so many of them born here and emigrated to Australia at a young age? Is there something about the music they grew up with in their homes, or is it a sheer coincidence in your case, in your experience?
Well, it's probably a bit of both, because you've got one element that's the influences of English music, because I guess as you start becoming a musician, you kind of look to overseas, and England and the US were the places of influence for Aussie rock. And then you've got that, what I guess Aussie rock is just so unique. It breeds an edgier, tougher sound historically, and it's probably a reflection of the sort of work that the gig scene that we had back in the 60s, 70s, and 80s, really.
Yeah. And mate, you're kind of like Bruce Willis in 12 Monkeys when he goes back in time. You were there for some of the great moments of like history, and like you're on Countdown. You went to see Led Zeppelin at the Sydney Showground. You're in Puberty Blues, and I was watching listening to the Grey Brothers with their great show, Australian rock show, and their Rock Brat website, and they love the music so much, and they know all the bands you're in and who was in all the bands you're in. But these for me, these nuggets of gold sort of were apparent in their coverage of your career, the amazing moments from arriving in Australia to as a kid to going to see Led Zeppelin at the Sydney Showground. What was your journey?
Well, that moment, that 27th of February 1972 at 2:20 p.m., not 3:20 p.m. as Robert Plant called out before they blasted into Immigrant Song, because it was the first year that daylight saving had occurred in Sydney. And that's why.
Wow.
Yeah, and I always remembered that. And yes, this bootleg came up the other week, and those songs, Immigrant Song and Heartbreak, have always been missing from these tracks. It's the first time I've heard it. And there's a fabulous moment where you can hear it. It's about a minute into the song where you can just hear the crowd just erupting, because it was all at the start of the showground, the old Sydney Showground, and everyone was supposed to be in the big stands there, but the stage just got completely stormed. Everyone jumped the fence. You can just hear everyone like a mad stampede rushing towards the stage for that first minute of the song.
Wow. Well, mate, I never went, like, I guess my first show was, Shell Harbour Workers Club, and it was like the choir boys or the party boys, So I don't really remember, I never went to a big outdoor show in Australia in the 70s, and so I imagine it. I'm sure some of the viewers and listeners do. They imagine the sound is terrible, and there's a non-existent lighting show, and they go, how do those people get into it? You know what I mean? Like, they see the Beatles at Shea Stadium, and it seems so primitive. What was it actually like? Like, what's it like? What was it like going on that day? What was the crowd like? And what was the sound like? Were people smoking dope? What were there a lot of cops around? Paint a picture for us.
I expect so. Yes, to all of the above. But being a 10 to 14-year-old and very innocent and unaffected, I was just blown away by the whole experience. It was an iconic gig. Like, and anyone that you talked to that witnessed it said it was something very, very special. And it was, and I think whatever it was, the 25,000 plus people, and they allegedly was more. It was just, well, it was at the thing was, it was at the prime I think when they were in their prime. Plant's voice was absolutely at peak then. I think they were just either brought out or were bringing out Zeppelin 4 at the time. So it was, to me, it was, and sort of stuff that I've heard since, that was when they were actually at peak performance. So it was a life-changing moment for me. It was like, oh yeah, that's what I want to do.
Scott, I didn't warn you this because we got stuck straight into it. But for the podcast listeners, we'll have a song every 5 minutes of interview. For them, you'll be on different episodes. What song can we play? We've just been talking about Zeppelin. What would you like to hear?
Well, we should probably play something a little historical, but which is a revision I did of Hard and Fast from the Boss album, which is on my Quick and the Dead album. And we might probably get into talking about some of that later on. But
no, we definitely will. We definitely will. I'm not here to just do nostalgia, mate. Okay, welcome back to the program. And this is the second part of our interview with Scott Ginn. Scott, welcome back. You just talked about going to see Led Zeppelin at the Sydney Showground, which is a famous show. It was on their DVD box set released maybe 10 years ago now, maybe even more. That changed your life? I read that you went and got a guitar, and there was a sale on at the store, and so you actually got musical instruments for the whole family. And then what? It was into covers. It was into performing in covers bands.
Yeah. So I had a friend that we were in a soccer team together, and he picked up a bass, and I had the guitar, and we just started jamming in his bedroom with very loud amps, and his parents were very kind to suffer our torturous sound. I clearly remember the first song that we ever played together was Creedence's Proud Mary. And yeah, and we were listening to things like, well, we were listening to Black Sabbath's Master of Reality, Grand Funk Railroad albums, that sort of stuff. And of course, Zeppelin and Deep Purple.
Yeah, yeah. And so that became what, you're old enough to go into pubs now, and you're sort of gigging around the place. And what was it like? I mean, I remember a live scene in Sydney that was very different to the way things are now. Can you paint a picture for us of what it was like when you got into the pubs and you started gigging in Sydney?
Well, it's even sort of one step back from that, which was, so as sort of 15, 16-year-olds just sort of trying to learn and being most influenced by whatever was around. The scene was really what they were called like Friday night dances, and there was a whole and often under 18, so focused on, you know, for younger kids, the underage, you know, not drinking age, and so they would generally be held at town halls, civic centres, that sort of thing. So our local haunt was Lane Cove Town Hall, and we would see Finch there. I think early Ted Mulligang, maybe John English, Hush, that sort of thing. Yeah, Buffalo. Buffalo was an influence on us sort of as I got a little bit older.
Yeah, yeah. And I guess when we were kids watching Countdown, I think it was you know, on a Sunday night, wasn't it? That we couldn't imagine what it would be like to be on stage, kind of singing. We didn't know they were miming. You know, in that studio audience, and I just watched a video before we did this interview with the Breakers, and you even, I think the song was actually called "When I'm on TV," and you were on TV, and the camera was actually part of the sort of, they're always very creative with their production, weren't they, on Countdown? And they actually had a camera directly in front of you on stage. I mean, what was that like? And being on Countdown, I mean, what happens the next day? You know, did your phone start ringing to your parents? You know, your parents must go crazy that all their friends see you on TV. What was that like?
I guess it was, I mean, I suppose we probably, you know, we'd been watching Countdown for several years. So it was like, yeah, finally we're going to get to do this. And definitely and I guess, I think I was just maybe 21 or 22 at the time. And maybe a little bit older. Can't do the sums, but anyway, it was the sort of first big TV thing for me to do, and it was very exciting. And you know, it all goes very, very quickly. You know, 3 minutes of fame, and no, look, it was just it was great, and the Countdown machinery, it was a very slick machine how they ran it, and like you said, they got quite creative. That Breakers clip, they sort of did some pre-footage with Gerald and myself as the guitarist, to set that sort of the TV mode thing up, with the girl watching the TV, and then had the actual live performance for the most part of the clip. Yeah, yeah. And is it in the middle? Is it in the middle of the day? I mean, you know, do you interact with the audience, the studio audience at all, or? No, you sort of get a call out, and you're on. From memory, we had a run through first, so you know what's going to be happening. But when it happens, it all happens pretty solid. And it's recorded. It was recorded on a Saturday night, Saturday late afternoon, and then went to air on a Sunday night. Right. And the Breakers also appeared in Puberty Blues, which is, again, you know, we've already hit three kind of, you know, major touchstones of a lot of people's youth. We've got Led Zeppelin at the Sydney Showground, and we've got Countdown, and now we've got Puberty Blues, the film. What was that like? That was good fun too. That was, I mean, our involvement was just one night set up at Carring Bar Inn, which was completely appropriate, seeing the whole thing was set around the Cronulla area, and they set the thing up just like a gig basically, and then we just mimed to the couple of songs that we did, and that was, and the footage, the short excerpts were taken from that.
Yeah. I don't want to I don't want to sort of get bogged down in just getting you to go over old memories for ages. But you've got some like touring, like that Iron Maiden tour when you were in Boss. That was the Iron Maiden tour when they played quite small venues, wasn't it? In fact, I mentioned Shell Harbour Workers earlier, and I think Iron Maiden actually played Shell Harbour Workers, and they're playing significantly bigger places overseas. Was that the tour that you opened for, or was it a later tour?
You're spot on. But the city centres were all your conventional. So it was Hordern Pavilion, Sydney, Newcastle Civic Centre, the Brisbane. Forgotten what the place was there.
Festival Hall.
Festival Hall, that's right, and the Melbourne one again. It's going to escape me what it was, but we played Canberra Theatre, I think it was the first night, and the odd one was the Shell Harbour's Workers Club, and it was real. They just seemed, it was sort of thrown. I've still got this program. I'm sure it was sort of just thrown in at the end, sort of thing, as an extra night, sort of in between, and it was really funny, kind of arriving at the gig early for sound check. And the roadies had literally, because the stage just wasn't big enough to accommodate that huge set that they had. And there was this whole extra stage that had been built out just to try to get the band on there. So it was good.
Yeah. So, let's have another song, I guess. We're more than 10 minutes in now. What song can we play now?
We might do something from the Rags and Riches Shipwrecked album, I think, called That's Life.
Okay. Welcome back to White Line Fever, third part of our interview with Scott Ginn from Rags and Riches and many other projects, including Mazz-XT, which we will discuss very shortly. Scott, we've been talking in the two previous installments about what it was like to play live music in Australia in the 1970s and largely into the 80s. And some of the other amazing, tours. You opened for the B-52s, an earlier band, and with Bosch, you opened for Twisted Sister and Def Leppard. What was the? I remember growing up here and being into that sort of music and being completely smitten by it because it was everything that I guess I didn't see locally. The guys dressed up and it was kind of aspirational. They almost sang up to where we wanted to be rather than down to where we were. You know what I mean? I just wondered, when did you liked Led Zeppelin, you liked the toughness of Australian music, but then you obviously did start to get an interest in Van Halen and Rat and Motley Crue and all these sort of bands. What was the trigger moment for that? Was it what made you suddenly take an interest in that?
I think, like about every red-blooded hard rock musician, the moment that Van Halen exploded onto the scene, it was a complete game changer. I can remember we were doing a few Van Halen songs in our set in band class at the time, and that would have been late 79, 80, I think. And that sort of whole big rock, if you like, arena metal that Van Halen brought to the table really was the trigger and opened up a lot of doors, I expect, for a lot of bands in the LA scene as well. Of course, the difficulty for bands of our sort of genre playing in Australia was there wasn't as many. Well, there wasn't as big a scene. It was a very niche but keen and dedicated bunch of metal heads in Sydney. But we had to sort of you had to keep on tap with what was going on, particularly in the States in the 80s, and you're kind of setting that as a benchmark and going, you want to be as good as that.
Mm. Yeah, and Boss was one band that was sort of seemed destined for greatness at the time, and you were in Boss, and you played at Selena's on a big support with Boss. The big question always comes up is about relocation, isn't it? About whether there was ever a move to move to here, which many bands did, like the Screaming Jets, right through to Airborne and Nick, everyone, or to Los Angeles, like Heaven did. Was that ever discussed? Was that ever seriously discussed in Boss?
Absolutely. The difficulty was that we didn't have financial backing behind us to just even get us over there, let alone live probably in squalor in one house together, kind of thing. And to me, that's always been a crying shame with that when the album did come out, and I can't remember how many countries it was released in worldwide, which was sort of a huge stepping stone at the time. But we should have got it out there, whether it was to go into Japan or into Europe or to the States. It needed the record company backing to do that, and unfortunately, we didn't have that.
Mm. And your final, the end of things at Boss was a bit abrupt, wasn't it? I mean, it didn't end well, or it didn't end in any way that you even understood. Is that right?
A little bit, yeah. I was just told I was no longer required. Whether there was, and it's never really been explained to me, but whether I was somewhat of a scapegoat because there was all this, there was the story that's long gone around about the drum machine thing with the album and the drum sound, and I've always sort of found that rather funny because what was on the album, the only thing that was drum machine was the snare drum and bass drum. What stuffed it up was that we were dealing with people that were trying to mix something that they weren't any experienced with. Here we were listening to Def Leppard's amazing production albums that Mutt Lange was churning out, all drum machine, same thing, but he knew how to make it work, and the people we were working with didn't, and so what ends up happening with the mix is you've got a mix that wasn't in the right proportions at all. And that's so that the track that you played earlier, which was my redo of Hard and Fast, a complete new recording of it, because that was one that I wrote for the band largely, was really almost an experiment to go, this is what it should have sounded like, fellas.
Yeah. And after now, so we'll move on to the stuff I'm sure you're far more interested in discussing now, which is Rags and Riches, and then into the long break you took from the music industry. Rags and Riches was, you did a solo project, and Rags and Riches was basically the band that you toured with when you went solo, isn't it? What was the kind of template for Rags and Riches? Like, was it? You mentioned Van Halen earlier and stuff like that. Was that what you were aiming for there?
Yeah, well, I think we were trying to find. We were definitely trying to find our own sound, which was probably somewhere between Van Halen's, Aerosmith, little bit Motley Crue, but how would I say? Well, we had this. There was a number of tracks where we called it rag and roll, if you like, and it was this sort of, and it was using brass stuff to have almost a swing band meets heavy metal, if you like, and so trying to give it's something unique so that it wasn't the same as everything else that was churning out, because there was a lot of stuff that was coming out of LA and the whole hair metal scene, and a lot of stuff started to sound really the same, and I didn't think that was the go. I thought you really got to, your songs have got to stand up by themselves and be something different, so that you've got some sort of a trademark that people can associate with.
Yeah. Now, I don't want to suggest that that's all you were doing until you had a break, because there was, many other things like Montreux, and you're in some tribute acts and blah blah blah. But eventually, it all kind of paused for a long time. Was that what was it like to make that decision to walk away from something you love so much? And I think a lot of people our age have done that. They've kind of been sort of burnt out on the things that have obsessed them for the first 40 or 50 years of their lives, and they just need a break. But what was it like for you?
Well, yeah, for me, it's like probably a number of other people, and I've heard people talk about similar sort of experiences, is that my wife and I were starting a family, and it was really hard getting home at 4 o'clock in the morning, and then wanting to play with you. He wanted to play with you at 7 o'clock in the morning and stuff. I'd also kind of set a little bit of a use by date of, if I don't crack it by sort of X time, then maybe I'm not going to do it, and so, and being a little bit financially responsible to my family too. So, yeah. That was it. Probably the other deal breaker was the whole the change in the music scene, because while I was still doing Rags and the Van Halen show that we did, I was running the studios, and I was recording a lot of the metal bands around the scene, and then when there was the dreaded sort of change to when the grunge era came into play, and a lot of the backside fell out of the metal scene, so there wasn't such a great attraction to stay in it. So all those things sort of kind of led me to going, yeah, time to call time on it, and that was really it. And it was kind of strange because, and I'd get people going. I stopped going to gigs too, and I essentially stopped listening to music effectively, because I'd get sick of going to gigs and people asking me and saying, so what are you doing now, man? And I'm like, nothing. I'm just not doing music anymore.
Wow. And well, let's have another song, and we'll talk about the Phoenix rising from the ashes afterwards. What song can we play now, Scott?
Okay, let's play a tongue-in-cheek one. This one is off the Mazz-XT Quick and the Dead album. It's called Twisted.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to White Line Fever. This is a new episode, but our guest, it's his final little segment with us. He's been on 3 previous programs, and I'd like to thank him for joining us. It's Scott Ginn from Rags and Riches, Mazz-XT, and many, many other projects. Welcome back, Scott. Now, you've been out of music for 20 years, and you decide to make a comeback. What prompts this decision, and what is a Mazz-XT?
Okay, let's answer the quick one first. Mazz-XT was looking for a name, came up with Mass Extinction, saw that there was other bands around by the same name, wanted something that was unique when you Googled it, and came up with this abbreviated version of Mazz-XT.
That's good.
So it's an abbreviation, Mass Extinction.
Okay.
And hence the first album, At the Brink of Eternity, with the image of a Armageddon kind of image of asteroid crashing into a planet. And at the moment before that happens is when you are at the brink of eternity. Now, what was the second question?
The second question is why you decided to make a return to music, and I've got a great follow-up question after this. But yeah, why you decided to make a comeback?
It was a kind of happy accident, because in the meantime in that period of not playing music, I got into making games because my kids played games, and I became an avid supporter of the Tomb Raider game, and got into communities online, and ended up being more fascinated by the game making process rather than so much playing games, and build a bunch of independent custom level games within that community. That led to me producing backing tracks for it, ambient music tracks, and then one day experimenting with my digital workstation, going, I wonder if I could make a rock song with this stuff, and off we went. And then once one was done, then the floodgates opened, and 20 years of creativity came flooding out of me.
Wow, that's an incredible story. Wow. So my follow-up question actually to your first answer was going to be, your work is at a museum, DNA, frozen DNA samples. Did that impact, was that connected to your interest in the concept of mass extinction? Like, was that why you thought that was an interesting, title?
It was kind of it was almost a tongue-in-cheek thing there again. It's a happy play on those words, because you've got yes, all the prehistoric sort of reference to it, but the modern sort of take on it being the sort of the heavy metal overtones of it. Right.
And is this work doing backing music for computer games? Is this a profitable venture? Is this the underpinning of your return to music? That does it finance the fact that you're back doing music?
No, totally an amateur hobby.
Oh, right. Okay. And so Rags and Riches also made a comeback. What was the industry you left 20 years previous? How did it compare to the one you'd re-entered?
Oh, the music industry. Well, or perhaps lack thereof, coming back. Look, massively different. And the steep learning curve for me was not only sort of learning the whole sort of digital recording process, which came actually fairly naturally because I was a sound engineer before, so that was a reasonably easy adaptation. What was the steep learning curve for me was the whole leap into social media. I'd never been on any social media before, so I sort of dragged myself screaming eventually onto Facebook to learn what was involved, and then the production and of the music itself, the online, setting up online sales and that whole marketing and the production, and the fun thing really for me, which was being able be able to not having to rely on a record company to bring out an album, that you can produce your own CDs, and I do all my own artwork for the CDs, which again is just satisfies my I guess my creative curiosity. So having that artistic control to be able to do whatever you want whenever you want is great freedom.
Yeah, right. And I guess as far as your goals and the progress you've made since you made the return to the music industry, I guess it might have been 5-6 years ago. Where are you at compared to where you expected and where you wanted to be?
Pretty much exactly where I planned to be, which was I kind of set a 5-year goal of saying I want to do 5 albums in 5 years, and that's not 5 new albums. That's at least 5 albums, and I've done that with the One Man Army, 2 Rags and Riches album, retrospective Rags and Riches albums, 2 Mazz-XT albums, and the 3rd Mazz-XT album's about 75% complete now.
Right.
And I'll probably either later this year or 2022.
What can you tell us about the album, mate? What any titles or subject matter? I mean, the subject matter doesn't seem to be about the end of the world and all that sort of stuff, even though the name of the band is inspired by those sorts of things.
Yeah, I tend to lyrically. I don't know that I tend to write in riddles in some ways, sometimes from experience, sometimes from sort of voyeuristic observation. So, and it's a mixture of, you know, I suppose in the past we would always write about drinking and womanizing and, you know, all the typical sex, drugs, and rock and roll that was the 80s. And I still kind of like those tongue-in-cheek kind of lyrics, but, you know, it is tongue-in-cheek when you get to my age.
in your own cheek now.
But some of the material, through some perhaps sad and life experience, which are too personal to relate directly, have given me some inspiration for writing perhaps some more serious lyrics. Yeah.
Right. So when can we expect this album out, Scott? And what will it be called, or is it too early to say?
Yeah, look, it doesn't have it. Yeah, it's just got the working title of Mazz-XT 3 at the moment, which is not very inspired. That'll change. I usually always have a title. It'll probably be one of the tracks that are on there. But my process is, you know, when you're writing and recording and doing the whole kit yourself, it's quite a long process, and I don't rush it, and I don't have to. I suppose it takes 1.5 to 2 years for each cycle to do the full thing. And once I've recorded it and then sort of got the actual production of the product underway, I then like to try and do some number of video clips that I've got a few sort of in the bag to gradually release. I may well do it in a kind of different order this year, or when I do it, which is to bring out a couple of singles first, sort of culminating in the album release, which seems to be a method that some bands are embarking on now.
Yeah. Well, Scott, I really appreciate your time. Before we go, is there a place that people who are listening and watching can visit you and check out what you're doing?
Yep. So there are Facebook, Mazz-XT, MAZZ-XT is on Facebook. Rags and Riches Australia is on Facebook. And all the material is available on my online store on Bandcamp. So you can deal directly with the artist there, and that's the best way to do it, folks. Okay, what song can we finish with there, Scott? Just thinking about this, and I think we'll Take It to the Top, which, with your football background, I've always thought this is a song that ought to be played, you know, for State of Origin, because it's got a great chorus that's highly uplifting and with a slightly different lyric. So let's do that. Take It to the Top from Heaven Is Only a Moment Away album. Okay, that's it for the viewers and listeners. Just stay online there, mate. I'll stop the streaming and stop the recording.